All right, today I'm going to be tearing into the front end on the Yamaha Grizzly 700. Both of these axles need replaced on here. I've done separate videos on how to replace just the boot, how to replace just the joint, but this time the axles are bad enough, both boots, both joints, to where we're just going to go ahead and replace those axles. I'm going to warn you right off the bat here, if you go online, you're going to find hundreds of different axles for the Grizzly 700. You want to stick with a good high quality axle. Otherwise, what ends up happening is the splines that run into your differential or the splines that run into your hub on these cheaper low quality axles, you're going to end up screwing up gears inside that differential. So typically the cheap ones don't last long. I'm going to put some links below in the description on axles that are high quality aftermarket axles, or you can always go back with the OEM axles. The problem with these genuine Yamaha axles is they are very expensive. If you were to buy these axles new from Yamaha, they'd be $300, $400, $500. So again, links below for good high quality aftermarket axles. I'm gonna maybe make a couple mention of some low quality aftermarket axles that I would stay away from. I don't like to do that very often, but I cannot stand when I see some junk axles get put into four-wheelers and it ends up screwing up more parts than what they started with being damaged. So again, check those in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, make sure you give us a thumbs up. We're going to walk through the entire process. We got a bunch of other videos on the Yamaha four-wheelers, a lot on this Yamaha Grizzly 700, so make sure you check those videos out on our channel. Thank you guys for watching. All right, first thing you're gonna wanna do is jack up that front end. You're replacing, again, both axles. I'm gonna show you how to remove wheel, pretty easy to do. Show you how to remove caliper, the front hub, the knuckle, and then we've gotta lift that A-arm up and slide that axle out. So I'm gonna be showing you that whole process, but first thing, jack that front end up. We've got a jack here and then a 4x4 underneath of it. It's super sturdy when we go to shake this four-wheeler around when we're trying to remove that axle. 17 millimeter nuts to remove these lugs. Okay, now we're gonna take and pull our tire off. That aside, we've got a cap underneath of that wheel. Looks like that. It's just gonna actually slide onto our axle nut. And then we've got a 12 millimeter bolts to remove our caliper. The nice thing about the front end, we didn't have this luxury on the back when I just shot that video, is we can move and actually get to this caliper with a ratchet and a socket, or an impact and a socket, I mean. On the back end that we just shot a video on, check out our channel for that. You gotta get in there with a wrench or a socket and a ratchet. But this you're able just to take and zip those out pretty easily, take and slide our brake caliper off. Now what you don't want to do is grab your front brakes. If you grab that front brake handle, what's going to do is put pressure on this brake pads. You're going to actually suck those pads together, and you've got to get in there and try to spread those apart. Creates a bit of a challenge. A lot of times you end up damaging those pads during the process. Again, I've shot videos on how to replace the front brake pads on here as well as the rear. I've done front wheel bearings and rear wheel bearings. We've done a service video. I've done a complete walk around this four-wheeler to show you some of the things we do and don't like. Make sure you check those videos out. All right, the stock axle nut is going to be 1 1/16 inches. That thing was on there tight. This nut is going to be hot. That was a lot of work to pull that off of there. All right, nut is off of there. Now we're able to take our hub, slide it off. Again, we've replaced wheel bearings, so all this we know is in really good condition. Set this aside, and now we're going to go ahead and pull our knuckle off. This is going to be where there's a little bit of a challenge for some. We've got a nut underneath of here. We've got some cotter pins. Fairly easy to remove those. Typically from the factory, these are in great shape. If they haven't been removed, people don't put oversized pins in there, and you're able just to kind of bend them with your finger and then slide them out. Now if somebody puts one that's too big or it's all dinged up and just a huge mess, those can be a little more of a challenge. Again, we can take and turn our wheel there. So so we can get to this backside a little bit better. All right, that pin is out. We're gonna go ahead and remove our tie rod. Sometimes you do have to remove the tie rod, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just easier to do it from the get-go. So that pin's out. We've got one more on the bottom A-arm. Okay, that one's out. I like to grab a shallow 19 millimeter. A lot of times, at least the bottom one you can get out using an impact. The top one you're gonna have to use a wrench for. Okay, that one's out. And we can remove our tie rod. That one is a 17. And then this top one here, we'll take and remove that 17 millimeter wrench on it. And now what I like to do is grab a crowbar. Sometimes people use pickle forks. That's an option. I don't like using them. A lot of times what happens is you damage that boot. But if you can take a hammer or a pry bar and a pry bar, put a little pressure on there without getting behind that boot, and just take and tap it on that knuckle. A lot of times it'll break it free. Do that with the bottom as well. Okay, bottom is broke free. And then the tie rod just dropped out. Zooming in a little bit, you're gonna have a hard time seeing with that guard on there, the inside, but I can continue showing you from the outside here. So we've got this knuckle completely disassembled here. We're gonna slide that knuckle out of the drive shaft. We're gonna lift up on this A-arm so we can get a straighter shot out of here. Now we're gonna take and actually just pull that axle, lift it straight, and then we're just gonna take and tap on that axle. And it's just gonna pull right out of there. So there's our bad joint. We've got a rip in the outer boot, but our front one or our inside is definitely damaged, was clicking really bad. So I'm gonna set that aside. I'm gonna grab our new one. Okay, sliding the new high quality axle in. Again, you definitely want a high quality axle. These splines are very, very important. They go into a very expensive bevel gear, a transfer gear that's in your front differential. And you wanna make sure that those splines, as well as the gears line up, they fit properly, and both of them are gonna be high quality. So inside joint here, outside joint, and then you've got your splines that'll actually go to your hub. And you, again, same thing, you wanna make sure that these are in good shape so that going into your front hub there, those splines don't wear out. And that would typically happen when you're in four-wheel drive. When you're needing the power the most is a lot of times when those cheaper axles will give out, and you'll end up with a mess of parts and a whole lot more money going back together. So next thing, there's a seal on the inside here that you're not gonna be able to see from where you are. I'm actually gonna take and zoom in because it is gonna be important that you inspect that, make sure it's in good condition. All right, going back together from this angle here, you're gonna be able to see what we're doing with this axle. Again, lift up on that A-arm because you wanna try to get this axle in there as straight as possible. Here's the seal that I was talking about. Make sure that that seal's in good condition. Make sure it's not folded over. Make sure when you slide this new axle in that you're not taking and folding that seal over. And we'll take and slide this axle straight into that groove there. A lot of times you can just take your hand and do a little tap on that axle, and a lot of times that axle will slide into place. If that's not the case, you can grab a rubber mallet, tap on the end there. But typically, I would say 9 times out of 10, you can slide that axle in there without a rubber mallet. You can just take and tap on the end of it. And make sure it's stuck into place there. You can take and give a little pull out to see if it slides back out. If it just slides right back out, then you've got a problem with that clip on the inside. Again, high quality axle, you're not gonna have issues with that, but the lower quality ones, they're not gonna use the right size snap ring, and you're gonna end up that axle just sliding out and then that seal getting damaged. Next, we're gonna take and put that knuckle back into place. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit so you can see that process. Here's our knuckle here. We've got your top, this is where your top A-arm mounts, tie rod here, and the bottom where your bottom A-arm mounts. Again, you want to inspect these boots, make sure they're not ripped or torn. If they are, you can go ahead and replace these ball joints or replace the entire knuckle, which isn't necessary. These ball joints with this clip right here just slide in and out. We're going to remove the nut that came on this axle because a lot of times it's a new nut. well, it should be a new nut. We'll take and slide this knuckle on. You'll slide that axle through the bearing area. My head's gonna be in the way for just a second. We're gonna line up our bottom A-arm and then our top A-arm. That's what you're gonna work on first. Doesn't really matter which one first, but you want those both to slide into place. We'll take and put our 19mm nut on the bottom. And I like to just start off by putting one or the other on, and then that way you can lift up on this knuckle without pulling that bottom joint out of that knuckle. We'll take and put our 17mm nut on the upper A-arm, and then we'll do the same thing for the tie rod. Tie rod, which is this one. We've got a nut that goes underneath the tie rod, a washer. We'll slide that nut and washer on this tie rod, and we'll tighten all these up. These do have to be lined up so that you can get these pins through there. And then we'll go ahead, tighten up our top one here. This is the most challenging because, again, using a wrench, so it can take a little bit of time to get this one in place. All right, we've got the top one in place. We're gonna slide that pin through. All right, then we'll run that tie rod pin through and then bend the end. So that is the 3 clips that we have. Now we're gonna take and put our caliper aside here while we go ahead and grab our hub. Slide our hub into place. Go ahead and grab our nut, throw it into place here, and we'll go ahead and tighten this down. Now we've got our front hub on there. What we're actually gonna do is there's a little spot for you to actually take and ding that nut. There's a little divot in the axle, and you wanna make sure you do that. Sometimes we'll Loctite that axle nut on there. It's important to do one or the other. You wouldn't have to do both. You can. On the back we did. On the front we didn't Loctite it, but we're gonna take and divot that nut, and that basically just kind of locks that nut from moving. You smash that into place there, and you don't want to do it too much because then when it comes time to pull that off there, you don't want to completely destroy your axle if all you're doing is needing to take that hub off of there. Go ahead and put our caliper back in. And we'll take our 2 12mm bolts. We'll tighten both of these down. Okay, now the only thing we have left to do, I'm gonna check the front differential oil. I'm gonna clean out some of the corn stalks, which this is typically the culprit on our machines in this area is corn stalks. They come up and they'll run through your front A-arms, A-arm guards, and they'll destroy those boots. So we'll clean up some of this area a little bit so we can see and check oil level, but that's really the entire process of replacing the front axle on the Grizzly 700. Again, if you guys got questions or comments, make sure and leave those below. If you found this video helpful, make sure you give us a thumbs up. We've got a bunch of other videos on this four-wheeler. Like I said, wheel bearings, brake pads, replacing the stator and the alternator, replacing the stator, magneto, as well as an overview. We've serviced this four-wheeler, so make sure you check those videos out. Thank you guys for watching.